What's the most terrifying creature that you can imagine? Walking out of the cinema after watching Alien Romulus, the latest film in the infamous Alien franchise, with adrenaline still coursing through my earthly human veins, I couldn't stop thinking that the answer, for me, was the monstrous beings I had just witnessed on the big screen inside. And I suspect I'm not the only one. Ever since the first Alien film was released in 1979, the creatures terrorizing the inhabitants of the many ships and planets in the series have captured the attention of audiences across the world, and over those 40 plus years, held it with a vice-like, almost face-hugger level grip. And now, with this most recent venture into the Alien universe springing up onto our screens, I want to find out, how scared should we be? Could these types of creatures and the worlds they spawn from even be possible or real? Will we ever venture far enough out into the universe to find other frightening examples of life? Or is the real threat much closer to home than we realize? From a scientific perspective, there is so much to unpack across the 9 films in the anthology. We have astronomy, astrobiology, chemistry, long-duration space travel, and astroarchaeology, all forming important aspects of these stories. So let's get into them and find out what holds water and what dissolves like metal under xenomorph blood. I'm Alex McColgan and you're watching Astrum. Join me today as we probe the Alien films to find out what's science and what's fiction.
Big things have small beginnings.
If you haven't seen the Alien films, or perhaps if you have but can't recall what happened with their continually sprawling plot lines, here's a quick recap. The first film, starring the brilliant Sigourney Weaver as the iconic heroine, Ellen Ripley, begins with the crew of the spaceship Nostromo responding to a distress call from a derelict ship on the moon of a gas giant. Upon entering the ship, one of the crew encounters an alien creature, and by encounters, I mean it jumps and latches onto his face, bringing him unwillingly into the complex life cycle of the xenomorph. The xenomorph, through the various stages of its biology, proceeds to wreak fear and destruction across the ship, and indeed across multiple films, with the rest of the franchise fleshing out the origins and subtleties of these fascinating life forms in different places and times. But where are these places? And when are these times? Following the entire multi-film timeline, some of the earliest events take place during the 5th film in the franchise, Prometheus, set in the year 2089, not too far in the future. The main character of Prometheus, Dr. Elizabeth Shaw, is performing an astroarchaeology survey where she and her team are studying cave paintings on the Isle of Skye off the coast of Scotland. They are searching for clues of ancient astronomical phenomena in the artwork of prehistoric humans. This is actually a fascinating part of real-world astronomy. By working like some kind of space Indiana Jones, studying rock carvings and paintings, scientists have been able to uncover significant cosmic events like comet impacts and supernovae that once lit up our night skies. For example, the carvings at Göbekli Tepe in Turkey are believed to chronicle a massive comet strike around 11,000 BC, an event thought to have ushered in a period of significant climate change known as the Younger Dryas, a mini ice age which profoundly affected early human societies. In Prometheus, Shaw's team find depictions of a towering human-like figure pointing towards a star in a constellation, and a constellation the characters seem to have seen before. They interpret the image's message as this entity encouraging humanity to go to that star and explore it. This constellation, and the star, are real. If you're standing on the Southern Hemisphere at night, you can make out the faint constellation of Reticulum for yourself, with the star Zeti Reticuli nestled inside it. The constellation matches up pretty well with the drawing seen in the cave scene, although it's not an exact match, which makes sense because stars move over time, a process known as proper motion. So when these drawings were made some 35,000 years ago, the pattern would have looked slightly different. However, despite this precision, this southern constellation is definitely not something the ancient humans on the Isle of Skye would have been tracing out from their position up on the north of our planet, so -1 point for accuracy there. Zeti Reticuli is a binary system, meaning two stars gravitationally bound to one another. Set at a distance of 39 light-years from Earth, both stars are sun-like in their mass, size, and luminosity. They orbit each other at about 4,000 times the distance that Earth orbits the Sun. And in the films, the slightly larger of these stars, Zeti Reticuli, is home to a ringed gas giant planet called Calpamus. Calpamus's moons are the setting for the first encounters of humanity with the xenomorphs, and even perhaps their creators. Habitable moons around gas giant planets are a familiar sight in science fiction films nowadays. In our Avatar video, we talked about the perils and pleasures of life thriving on the moon of a gas giant. However, LV-426 and LV-223, the two moons of interest around Calpamus, are nowhere near as lush and enticing as the oasis of Pandora. Both are barren rocks with few signs of life and atmospheres that are toxic to humans, and the way the moons are represented may make them somewhat toxic to physics nerds too. LV-426, also known as Acheron, has been subject of inconsistency across the films. The moon was described as having a diameter of just 1,200 kilometers, about a third the size of our Earth's moon, which, despite its small size, was said to have a surface gravity of 0.86 g, implying a ridiculously dense composition that cannot be found on any other moons or asteroids. To put this into perspective, a moon with such gravity and size would have an average density of around 48 grams per centimeter cubed. This is about 10 times higher than our planet at about 5.51 grams per centimeter cubed, which is made up mostly of iron. LV-426 would have an average density more than twice that of uranium's 19.1 grams per centimeter cubed, and would be over 4 times denser than lead at 11.34 grams per centimeter cubed. In fact, it's only a third the density of the Sun's core, which is 150 grams per centimeter cubed. Additionally, at such a small size, the surface would be noticeably curved to anyone standing on it. Even flat Acheroners wouldn't be able to deny it. But unfortunately, this curvature is not visible in any of the scenes on the moon's surface. An even bigger problem comes from real-world observations of Zeti Reticuli. The consensus so far is that the star has no gas giant planets in orbit, and in 2007, the Spitzer Infrared Space Telescope made the chances of the planet Calpamus and its moons existing even less likely, as it seemingly detected a debris disk around the star. This would imply that the system had not yet settled into a stable solar system, with planets still forming out of the disk of gas, dust, and rock. However, later observations from the ALMA radio telescope array found that the debris field Spitzer detected was found with high certainty to be a background signal. So there is yet hope for the discovery of a giant planet, with a ready-made name for it and its moons. Despite this inaccuracy, we can probably cut writers some slack. At the time of Alien's release, exoplanets were still the stuff of speculation, with the first confirmed detection in 1992. And, as we've discussed in other videos, the moons of gas giants, even in our own solar system, remain some of the most tantalizing prospects in the hunt for extraterrestrial life. So they were on the money there. Upon discovering these prehistoric signposts in the cave, Shaw's team quite quickly acquire funding from the Weyland-Yutani Corporation, a sort of Amazon of the future with extraordinary technological resources, and they make the 39 light-year journey to investigate Zeti Reticuli in a ship called, drumroll, the Prometheus. The journey, according to the film, takes 2 years. 2 years. 39 light-years in 2 years. 39 times the distance light travels in 1 year in just 2. From our current understanding of physics, it is simply not possible for anything with mass to travel faster than the speed of light. And from what we can see, the Prometheus doesn't seem to have any kind of wormhole-esque teleportation abilities. so we can assume that it moves under the power of some kind of propulsion system, like an ion engine we would recognize today. Even if we took 1,000 of the current best ion engines and made each of them 1,000 times more powerful, it would still take a 1,000 metric ton ship around 250 years to travel to Zeti Reticuli. However, I believe we can work out what the writers were thinking when they came up with this traveling time. They would have been making use of a phenomenon known as length contraction, whereby distances shrink for fast-moving observers. Let's say the Prometheus was able to travel at 99% the speed of light. If we run the calculations and we ignore needing time to speed up and slow down, we find that, for the ship and its crew, the time needed to travel between the two stars would contract to around 2 years. So we found their magic number, but we still don't have an explanation for how they were able to reach these speeds. And even if they could travel this close to the speed of light, the calendar on the ship would only apply to the ship. Zeti Reticuli would be 37 years further into the future, and so would the Earth, with the return journey bringing the same problems. In the case of the Prometheus, discoveries and events on Earth could render the journey completely pointless by the time they get back to Earth, if they ever do. This is a classic sci-fi obstacle, one that I explored in a video about Interstellar. So the franchise doesn't seem to have a good answer to the means of traveling great distances, but they have struck on an idea that space agencies considering long-duration missions have thought about: biological stasis, or as it's called in the alien universe, hypersleep. Hypersleep could allow humans to endure lengthy space missions by drastically slowing their metabolism. This is not an alien concept to current science. NASA has considered the idea of stasis as part of its plan for human exploration of Mars, and Mother Nature has been playing out various phenomena of it for millennia. One study proposed the torpor-inducing transfer habitat, where astronauts would be put into a torpor state using therapeutic hypothermia. A torpor state is similar to hibernation, nature's answer to hypersleep. Hibernation in animals involves significant physiological changes, including reduced heart rate and breathing, with the brain remaining minimally active to control the state of other organs. This significantly reduces their metabolic rate, minimizing the need for food, water, and oxygen, and in the case of humans in space travel, would allow for a smaller and lighter spacecraft while ensuring that the astronauts arrive at the peak of their physical fitness, not withered and fed up. However, as of right now, hypersleep is not a viable solution for humans endeavoring to traverse the vast distances of space. NASA and other space agencies are for now focusing on developing living systems and preventative medicines that will aid the astronauts in maintaining good physical and mental health, which is no mean feat when in space, where you must contend with microgravity causing muscles to weaken, radiation damaging DNA and cells, and the punishing mental struggle of isolation and being so far from a human's natural home. So, although we are nowhere near able to travel the kinds of distances we see in alien films, especially not in the next 100 years, it's not infeasible that we might be able to suspend our space travelers in hypersleep such as Shaw, Ripley, and their crews did. But if theirs and other alien missions are anything to go by, we may not want to make those journeys for fear of what we could find. And that brings us on to the xenomorph. The xenomorph is one of science fiction's most terrifying extraterrestrials. Truly and unrelentingly alien in every sense of the word. But I'd wager that what makes the xenomorph so terrifying is its similarities to some of the Earth's most gruesome inhabitants. By borrowing elements from parasitic organisms, rapid genetic adaptability, and extreme survival mechanisms found in nature, the xenomorph's biology creates the perfect predator, survivor, adapter, and reproducer all rolled up into one. But how realistic are its infamous traits? Let's start with the life cycle. According to the films, a xenomorph starts out as an egg laid by the queen of its colony, the first of many insect comparisons. Dormant and inert at first glance, the egg is in fact a trap waiting to be sprung, for inside, a so-called facehugger is lying in wait, The facehugger is a crab-like creature with exceptional speed and strength, and it has one goal: find a host in which to implant the embryo it harbors, allowing the next stage of the life cycle to initiate. When the egg detects movement, or perhaps the increased presence of gases like CO2 from a nearby organism like an unsuspecting human host, the facehugger will leap out in pursuit. This is not unlike what certain Earth fungi will do, releasing spores to infect animals that pass by to continue their own life cycle. The creators of Alien were heavily inspired by wasps when designing the xenomorph. You can see the insect inspiration in its exoskeleton and general creepy crawly form. In particular, it is intended to mirror parasitic wasps like Cortesia glometara and the tarantula hawk wasp. These wasps lay their eggs inside the bodies of other insects or arachnids. The larvae that hatch feed on the host from the inside out, deliberately consuming non-vital organs first to prolong the host's life, ensuring that the larval wasps have a fresh food source until they are ready to emerge. Given that this already exists in the natural world on Earth, it's not ridiculous to believe that this could exist in more extreme forms in exoplanetary ecosystems. In the natural world, there are numerous examples of parasites that exhibit similarly disturbing behaviors. For instance, the parasitic fungus Opiocordyceps unilateralis infects ants, taking over their central nervous system. The fungus compels the ant to climb to a high point before it dies, allowing the fungus to sprout from the ant's body and release spores to infect more hosts. The ant, much like the human host of a xenomorph, is reduced to a mere tool for the parasite's reproduction. Another example is the parasitic barnacle Sacculina, which infects crabs. Sacculina, essentially a living needle, injects the cells into the crab's body, where they grow and eventually take over the crab's reproductive system. The infected crab is rendered sterile and begins caring for the parasite's offspring as if they were its own, all while its body is slowly consumed from within. This is the stuff of nightmares. Once the chest burster gets loose from its human host, it grows extremely rapidly into its final, lethal predatory form. But perhaps too rapidly. In many of the Alien films, we see chest bursters emerge quite small, but within a matter of hours, they are multiple times the size. How? We don't see them feed on anything in the meantime? This is a source of controversy within the Alien fandom. In the extended universe beyond the films, it's implied that the chest burster goes on a feeding frenzy in the ship's stockpiles, becoming a huge caterpillar before transforming all that material into the classic xenomorph. But since we don't see that in the films, I'd like to explore some other options. One theory is that the xenomorph combines another trait from insects with an ability of plants. Insects breathe through a network of tiny tubes called trachea, which extend through their bodies and open to the outside world called spiracles. Oxygen enters these spiracles and diffuses directly into the tracheal system, delivering oxygen to cells and tissues, bypassing the need for a circulatory system to transport oxygen. This direct diffusion through their exoskeleton allows insects to efficiently manage respiration without lungs. Plants sequester carbon through the process of photosynthesis, where they absorb carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and use sunlight to convert it into glucose and oxygen. The carbon is then stored in the plant's biomass. Perhaps the xenomorph is able to absorb gases from the air to facilitate its rapid growth, using some kind of photosynthesis-like process to convert the gas to muscle and tissue. There are a couple of problems with this theory, however. One is that the tracheal respiration becomes less effective the bigger the animal becomes. The volume to surface area ratio gets bigger exponentially, so quickly there is not enough surface area to dissolve oxygen through to supply the entire biomass. This is the reason why insects aren't so big nowadays, but were much larger when Earth had 300% more oxygen around 290 million years ago. We also see a few instances where the xenomorph is able to withstand the vacuum of space. If it did breathe through open spiracles, these would be a weak point in the exoskeleton. where material inside could burst out from the pressure difference. And a final problem comes from theories about what the xenomorph is made from. Some people think the creature must be silicon-based, which is much less readily available in the atmosphere of a ship. So, if that were the case, it wouldn't have enough building blocks to grow so quickly. So, by whatever means, you now have yourself a fully grown xenomorph on board. It's fast, it's smart, it's ruthless. The odds are stacked against you for mounting any kind of defense against this thing. But even if you do manage to land a strike and pierce its exoskeleton, what comes spurting out? Acid blood. And not just any acid, but clearly some of the strongest acid in existence that can corrode through metal, layers and layers of metal.
Next deck.
Acids are defined by their ability to break apart other molecules by donating atoms that form stronger bonds. Acids are measured by their pH. The lower the pH, the stronger the acid. Hydrofluoric acid, with a pH around 2.1, is a classic example of a powerful acid. It is one that chemists will handle commonly, but extremely carefully, as it is capable of dissolving glass, metals, and penetrating tissue and bones due to the highly reactive fluorine it contains. The xenomorph's blood, however, would need to be even more potent, possibly similar to fluoroantimonic acid, the strongest acid known to science, with a pH of -31.3. This superacid is so corrosive it can dissolve nearly any material. If xenomorph blood were made of a compound like this, it could explain the rapid corrosion seen in the films. But if a few drops of this stuff can sizzle its way through the bulk of a metal spaceship, how is it contained within the xenomorph? I mean, our blood is essentially neutral at pH 7.35, and even a slight deviation will see you quickly developing acidosis, putting you in real trouble. So how is the xenomorph doing it? Short answer? Teflon. Yes, the material on your non-stick pans, that stuff. If the xenomorph's blood cells were lined with a material like Teflon, known for its carbon-fluorine bonds, which are so strong that the fluorine atoms in fluoroantimonic acid can't break it apart. This would prevent the acid from damaging the xenomorph itself. Some fans speculate that the xenomorph is resistant to its own blood because it is silicon-based lifeform instead of carbon, like all life on Earth. Silicon could work similarly to Teflon in containing the xenomorph's acid blood, as it also forms very strong bonds that acids struggle to break down. However, even silicon bonds probably couldn't resist the destructive power of fluoroantimonic acid. And to add to that, there is very little evidence in the films that xenomorphs are silicon-based, and the fact that they can feed and grow inside a carbon-based human seems to actively contradict it. It's not clear why the xenomorph has acidic blood. It seems likely for defense purposes, in the same way that many reptiles on Earth will secrete toxic or irritating substances when provoked. But it could also be for energy, harvesting the power locked up in the acid's molecular bonds to power its attacks, in a similar way that a car battery does. Or perhaps the Hollywood writers just thought it would be cool. Either way, the acidic blood of this alien is one of the harder to believe aspects of its physiology. It's a very big ask for an organism that has to grow with fairly scarce resources available to it to not only produce an acid of this strength, but also generate organs and tissues that can withstand its ferocious corrosiveness. However, although clearly powerful, xenomorph blood is not the scariest chemical in the franchise. In the prequel, Prometheus, the scientists who descend onto LV-223, who have a somewhat casual attitude to personal safety, encounter a strange black goo. This goo, elegantly named This, seems to have been made as a bioweapon by an ancient civilization called the Engineers, and is somehow what all the biology in the franchise boils down to. You can trace the origins of the xenomorph and, also surprisingly, humanity back to the goo.
DNA. Match.
It's us.
But it has far more immediate and sinister implications for anyone who comes into contact with it. The black goo functions as a genetic accelerant and mutator, a substance capable of radically altering or even completely destroying an organism's physiology. For example, when the goo infects native worms on LV223, they transform into hammerpedes, creatures with heightened aggression and acidic properties, reminiscent of the xenomorph's traits. This suggests that the goo can weaponize any biology it encounters, morphing it into the xeno direction. The goo's mechanism of action appears to be a violent restructuring of DNA, effectively hacking the genetic code of any organism it touches. This process could be similar to CRISPR, a real-world genetic technique used by bacteria to defend against viruses, and now also by scientists in creating new medicines. CRISPR edits genes by inserting new DNA sequences. The black goo seems to be doing the same, forcing them to express new, weaponized traits. This is seen when one of the crew members of the Prometheus is exposed to the goo, which alters his sperm. When he later has intercourse with Dr. Elizabeth Shaw, she becomes impregnated with a creature that eventually develops into a facehugger-like organism, leading to the creation of a xenomorph-like entity called the Deacon, without any direct involvement from an actual xenomorph. In that case, rather than existing as a single, definable species, the final form of the xenomorph might simply be the result of either the embryo or the black goo mingling genetically with various organisms, creating different forms depending on the host. For example, in Alien 3, a dog is infected by a xenomorph embryo, resulting in the Runner, a creature with dog-like characteristics. It makes sense with the name too, with xeno meaning strange or alien, and morph meaning form or shape. It's not specific, it's almost conceptual. It suggests that the classic xenomorph is less a species and more a manifestation of genetic combination with humans, leading to the rather unsettling idea that the xenomorph, in a way, has been inside us all along, a kind of dark mirroring of us. The influence of this chemical on the franchise is far-reaching across time and space. In one scene, it's seen seeding life on planet Earth, as one of the engineered species drinks a vial of it and his body and genetic material disintegrates and redistributes. In another, the artificial human, David, a whole other scientific rabbit hole in this series that we might get to in another video, is seen destroying an entire city of engineers with the goo and performing experiments to create new kinds of xenomorphs. Thankfully, there is no analogous chemical on Earth today, but with CRISPR, we are beginning to develop tools that can change the genetic makeup of not just embryos, but living organisms, something we must surely take steps to keep out of the hands of dangerous actors, lest we want to end up creating our own downfall. As we shed back the layers of the Alien franchise, we find a tapestry woven from the threads of our deepest fears, our scientific curiosity, and our fascination with the unknown. The xenomorphs, with their terrifying life cycle, parasitic nature, and unstoppable predatory instincts, are the perfect embodiment of what might lurk in the darkest corners of the universe. But more than just creatures of nightmare, they are a reflection of our own world, drawn from the real-life horrors of nature and amplified through the lens of speculative science. So, as we look to the stars and imagine what might be out there, let's not forget the lessons of these films. The xenomorphs may be fictional, but the questions they raise are valid. How far will we go in our quest for knowledge? And when we finally meet whatever is out there, will we be prepared for what we encounter? What will the consequences be of discovering alien life forms? The alien universe is a stark reminder that in the vast, uncaring expanse of space, we may not be alone, but we might wish we were. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the science and fiction of the Alien franchise. Although no one can hear you scream in space, we can hear you down in the comments, so let us know what aspects of Alien you find most frightening and what you think we might have missed. Thanks for watching. We are now very close to our end goal of 1,000 astronauts on Patreon, and I can't thank you enough for having answered the call. The closer we get, the more it's looking like I'll be able to expand our content here and bring back Astrum Answers. So submit your video suggestions and questions over on Patreon. If you'd like to become an astronaut, you can join the Patreon with the link down below. When you join, you'll be able to watch the whole video ad-free, see your name in the credits, and submit questions to our team. Once again, a huge thank you from myself and the whole Astrum team. Meanwhile, click the link to this playlist for more Astrum content. I'll see you next time.